Welcome to Hour 6, and this time we're going to stay on the subject of transportation and dig a little more deeply. We talked about electric vehicles and hybrids in the last hour. They are definitely a reason for hope because they're the future. But equally important are other changes that are now occurring with transportation, and these other developments also inspire a great deal of hope. From non-electric cars that are using less fuel to public transportation options that are spreading rapidly around the world, and completely new out-of-the-box ideas for ride sharing and car sharing and a lot of other developments. You put them all together and a new era of transportation is beginning. So let's examine this trend. Another reason for hope is that transportation is getting more efficient, and public transportation is not only growing, it's becoming a lot more enjoyable for the experience that people have in public transportation. Let's look at some of what is happening. We're seeing the development of mass transit options now that are really very exciting. But before we get to those, let's look at the old models of transportation with the internal combustion engine, because even there we see reasons for hope. The vehicle fuel economy numbers are improving dramatically. Now, this isn't good enough. Of course, the transition to electric vehicles is a very powerful trend that is much more important. But this is significant, and it is really helping because we're seeing absolute declines in some regions and nations. I'm happy that the U.S. is actually almost leading the way. The European Union, as it has for a long time, is doing more, but the U.S. has changed on this, and that's really good news. China has also changed, and you see they're on a trajectory that's even more impressive than that of the U.S. if they keep going, and I'm pretty sure they will. So cars, the old internal combustion cars, they're getting more comfortable and larger even as the pollution from these cars is going down. This has gone largely unnoticed, but it is a very significant trend that is reducing global warming pollution. Very, very exciting. And I talked about absolute declines. Well, in the U.S., we have seen the consumption of fuel for transportation go down. It actually peaked 10 years ago and has been going down since then. So that's a reason for hope right there. Also, if you do the market surveys, and of course the auto companies do it all the time now, fuel economy has become the #1 factor for consumers in deciding what kind of new car to buy. Now, there are a lot of reasons for that, obviously. As we said in the last hour, the cost of gasoline has been going up, the cost of diesel has been going up, and in tight economic times, it becomes a very significant factor, all the more so the higher the fuel prices go. That's also encouraging the shift to electric vehicles. But again, this in and of itself is a reason for hope. Now, this is another surprise. The use of vehicles, at least when measured by vehicle miles per person, peaked some years ago and has been dropping for 9 years in a row in the United States. So this is a significant trend. Now, this is also very interesting, and it's worth looking carefully at because it doesn't look like a big difference right away, but this is something that the economists use a kind of a gobbledygook word to describe, decoupling. And what that means, obviously, is that the growth in the economy and the number of vehicle miles traveled used to be tightly coupled. When one went up, the other went up at exactly the same rate, at exactly the same time. That relationship has been broken. It has been decoupled. And we're now seeing the economy after the Great Recession starting to go up again, and vehicle miles traveled is now decoupled. So that is a very hopeful development where pollution from the transportation sector is concerned. We saw another kind of decoupling back in the 1970s when the OPEC oil crisis pushed the price of oil up. At that time, there used to be a very tight coupling between the growth in the economy and the growth in energy use. They used to be exactly linked together. But after oil prices shot up, there was a massive wave of investment in efficiency and other new technologies, and that became decoupled. So it's a very positive sign. And we're seeing yet another trend like this that I'll show you in a moment. Now, here's one of those out-of-the-box ideas, car sharing. And actually, the number of vehicles that are taking part in ride-sharing programs in North America, US and Canada and Mexico, is projected to continue growing significantly. Some of you know the Zipcar phenomena, and there are others as well. Still, 80% of cars in the US at any given time are empty other than the single passenger / driver. So you can see that as a huge problem, which it is, or you can see it as a huge opportunity for the growth of these new patterns like ride sharing, like really enjoyable and affordable public transportation. Bike sharing. This has taken off. Nearly 700 cities now have active bike sharing campaigns, including this city that we're in. Just 14 years ago, there were only 5 cities. Now there are 700. You do the math on that, that's a very impressive increase. And lots of people really enjoy this program. The number of people using public transportation, these are US figures, they're comparable figures in other countries. The number of people using public transportation has been going up quite significantly, and it's projected to grow further in the years ahead. Light rail systems are increasingly popular. This happens to be an example from the capital of California, Sacramento, where they have a wonderful light rail system. There are lots and lots of other examples, and if you know somebody who lives in a city with one of these options available, you know how much people love them. Back decades ago, before the rails were ripped out of the streets, it's a long story, the trolleys were very popular. San Francisco is one of the few cities that still have these. These are kinds of, in a way, these light rail systems are heirs to the old romance that people had with trolleys. Comfortable, quiet, very, very efficient. People enjoy them, and that's why you're seeing a steady and significant increase in the use of light rail systems, not only in the US, again, where these figures come from, but in a lot of countries around the world. And this is a very hopeful sign and a reason for hope. China, again, is leading the world with the building of urban rail transportation networks. They're going to have 3,000 kilometers of them by next year. It's absolutely phenomenal. This comes incidentally from the very impressive United Nations report that came out yesterday from a commission chaired by former Mexican President Felipe Calderón. Lots of good material in that. More than 160 cities have implemented bus rapid transit systems. And of course, the traffic jams that many Americans complain about all the time are even worse in a lot of the big cities in the developing world. It can cause absolute chaos, not to mention all of the pollution and the global warming pollution associated with it. So there's some new innovative bus rapid transit systems, including, incidentally, one of my favorite developments, and that is electric buses, which over the long term may have an even bigger impact than electric vehicles. There are some very, very exciting companies out there. And by the way, the riding experience there is even better, and people rave about it. In the developing countries, there are some homegrown solutions that are similar to the ones that I have been describing here in the developed countries. Here in Manila, the battery-powered jeepneys are very popular. Lots of similar examples in cities throughout the developing world. In Japan, the East Japan Railway's new trains run on lithium-ion rechargeable batteries. This is probably a wave of the future, although the rapid new developments in battery technology that we talked about in an earlier hour is probably going to cause some changes in the kinds of batteries used in these systems. But it's very, very impressive. And if anybody has ridden one of these bullet trains in Japan, you know what that experience is like. Unbelievably efficient, unbelievably comfortable, unbelievably fast. And the people who have access to this technology absolutely rave about it. We're seeing the spread of this technology. Spain is now one of the leaders here from Sevilla. And of course, China, once again, is the world's leader in developing and deploying this new technology. They already have proposed the largest infrastructure project in the world, high-speed, highly efficient, high-speed rail connecting 17 countries in Europe, Asia, and the Middle East. It is a stunning project, and one of the flagship projects illustrating how advances in sustainable technology can sharply reduce global warming pollution in the transportation sector. Now, to connect all these dots, again, with renewable electricity, both from solar and wind, and much more efficient and affordable storage options, better, stronger, and smarter grids, electric vehicles, and now electrified mass transit and highly efficient intercity and intra-city mass transportation options, we are seeing a very powerful reason for hope that the global warming pollution in the world's transportation sector, again, 25% of the total, that these reductions are going to continue. Then you see some other out-of-the-box ideas. A lot of people know about the Uber company and its smaller competitor Lyft, and there are some others as well, where the entire taxi cab industry is beginning to be disrupted with a more efficient option. Maybe there's some problems that need to be attended to and addressed. I'm not an expert on that, but I know that there is a sharp increase in efficiency and a sharp reduction in emissions when these new, much more efficient approaches are taken into the transportation sector. We're also seeing the redesign of some cities to achieve a better match between housing patterns and the construction of apartments and condominiums co-located with mass transit stops, with, in some jurisdictions, subsidies on mortgages when developers and builder owners decide to locate in an area where people can walk directly from their front doors to the mass transit options that are increasingly available. So it's a very exciting development, and this massive improvement in the transportation sector generally, like the electric vehicle sector that we talked about last hour, is adding up to a major revolution in sustainable transportation, and that is another reason for hope.